Good afternoon. I am Connor Seifert with Job Service Kalispell. Thank you for joining us this March to attend the Blueprint for Business Success seminar. Virtual attendees are muted during the presentation, but we encourage you to use the chat box for asking questions, which will be monitored and addressed as time allows. As always, we ask that your questions and comments are polite and respectful to all attendees and the presenter. And at this time, we'd encourage our live audience to make sure that your phones are on silent. Your voice matters in the anonymous 2-minute survey provided at the end of the seminar. Viewer participation helps us to improve this program and continue delivering relevant topics and content to Montana businesses. Today, we have the privilege of learning about fundamental areas where you can make improvements that directly impact your profitability and working capital. Please allow me to introduce the subject matter expert presenting today, Garrett Robinette, Chief Operations Officer at Mountain Meadow Herbs. He has extensive experience as a team leader in manufacturing. For over 20 years, he oversaw teams in production, logistics, information systems, quality, and facilities. His work of increasing efficiencies across business industries demonstrates his passion for continuous improvement and creating sustainable business systems. Garrett's hands-on experience in operations, business development, and supply chain makes his current membership with the Kalispell Chamber of Commerce Manufacturers Alliance a perfect fit. He holds a Bachelor of Business Administration from Washington State University, College of Business and Economics. Now it's time to learn business efficiencies that impact the bottom line. Please welcome Garrett Robinette.
Thank you. Well, all right, thank you. Job Services Kalispell. Happy to be here. One thing I want to address right away is I don't feel like an expert. Most of this presentation is from my experience in other businesses. I've worked for three other businesses that are similar size and realize that, a lot of times there's the same issues. And then also have done some consulting for some service industries. And it just seems like small businesses have kind of the same hurdles to get over. So we'll go ahead and start. All right, so first thing, where I work, so Mountain Meadow Herbs, I give you a little background. They were founded in 2001 by Kathy Garber. She was part of the Plains community, Amish, and she had a son who had kidney issues. And the doctors told her that at the beginning that he wasn't going to live more than probably 2 years. And that was something that kind of started her journey down the road of looking for alternative supplements. And so she was able to find a regimen using natural herbal supplements. He at the age of 16, ended up with a kidney transplant from his father. And to this day, he's doing fine. You would never know that there was an issue. But that really kicked off for her kind of this journey in her Plains community that allowed her to address things that people were having ailments for. And so a lot of the products that we do are about 90% have a story behind it. There was somebody had an issue or, some sort of, help that they needed and kind of help them out. In 2009, though, she sold the company to the current owner, and he has a similar passion for supplements. And so we kind of still have that background and kind of that DNA of just a passion for what we do. And then just a little bit about what we do as a company. So we have our line Mountain Meadow Herbs, which is made up of capsules and some liquids. And a big part of it is between like the birth, fertility, immune support, which I was getting sick this week, so I took a lot of it. Works, by the way. Family health, recovery maintenance. We do a lot of detox stuff, sleep, stress, and some mood and energy. But we also do contract manufacturing. And so we have about probably half of our business that we do for other companies that we do business to business with. And so that's pretty fun to do that. So the first part, I want to talk about efficiencies, financials. So there's a psychologist, Abraham Maslow, says, a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I'm sure you guys have heard it before. The reason I mention that is my degree's in accounting and I like numbers. So we're going to start with the financials because I'm really biased with that. And it's also, financials are just a good measurement. It's a good way to tell how your company's doing. So I'm going to start really basic. So accrual-based accounting versus cash-based accounting. And I hesitated to put this in here because it felt like a school subject or something really simple. But the one thing that I've seen is a lot of companies they think they do one thing, but they kind of practice doing the other. So accrual-based accounting is where you recognize your revenue and your expenses in the same period. And it's really the best way to look at your financials and get a good idea. Cash-based accounting, most of us do that in our house. You look at your bank account, you kind of know what's coming in, you know what's going out, and you're able to tell what's out there. And accrual-based accounting, you know, there's a lot of companies, when you fill your IRS forms, you say, yep, I'm accrual-based accounting. But in practice, what they do is cash-based accounting. And one of the obvious things is if you're as a business, if you're looking at your bank account on a daily basis and making financial decisions, you're kind of acting as a cash-based company. And so for the complexity of most businesses, accrual-based accounting is a necessity. And one of the parts of that, you know, just so we get our words put together, is month-end close. So every month, it's standard to go through and kind of close all your accounts and reconcile, so you can get a really good financial view of what's going in the company, and then you make decisions going forward. When I started with Mountain Meadow Herbs, they were doing accrual-based accounting. We had a new controller, and she did a great job setting things up. But even then, there were some things that we had that were more cash-based or kind of messed things up. And so one of the things was payroll, and a lot of us pay every 2 weeks. So with 52 pay, or with 26, there's some months, 2 months, that you have 3 pay periods. And that can really mess up your month to month, because you'll have, you know, 10 months that look really good because they're understating their payroll. And then you'll have another month of, 2 months that, you know, obviously are a little bit higher. And so it's really hard to really get a really good idea of your cash flow. There's a lot of other things that help with accrual-based accounting. It kind of makes sure that you know what you're making, especially in the service industry when you can have a lot of seasonality. Even with recognizing where we were at, it took us about 1.5 years to get good financials to make good decisions. That seems like a long time, but you know, from the beginning, we were really trying to put things together. And there's some reasons why, and we'll kind of talk about that. So one of it was rolling forecasts. So we had never budgeted or did a rolling forecast, which is amazing that, you know, that they didn't understand what the plan was for the month. And so we started right away trying to do a budget. But even with the rolling, one thing. So the difference between a budget and a rolling forecast. So budgets, traditionally you set for the year and you just kind of sit with it. And that's what you're stuck with. A rolling forecast, especially in business, when your revenue changes or expenses changes, you know, you can readjust that and then make decisions, usually on a quarterly basis. And so one of the things that we got into when you get into budgeting or forecasting is some of the challenges. So one of the first things we started out with is really poor chart of accounts. So there was, you know, you can imagine there's all these little buckets where you say what money is going to go where. Well, if you're not putting them in the right buckets or you don't have the right buckets, it can be really difficult. And so working through that as a team and management, trying to figure out is pretty important. The next is entering data in a timely manner. So a lot of times when you're busy, that's the last thing you want to do is enter in your invoices and your bills. It ends up being something that can sit on your desk and you can be months behind, but it's really a necessity. And then non-existing historical data. So this is one of the things we ran into also, where it's like, well, how much do we spend on, you know, paper towels? Well, we don't have the data there to really set a good forecast going forward. And that can be really difficult then to set the budget. Non-accrual based accounting. If you're not doing it on accrual based accounting, it really doesn't work from a budget standpoint. And then time to flesh out the bad data. So for us, we had some stuff that was in our system from a COGS standpoint, the cost of goods sold. It took us 2 years to actually get good data that we could say, yep, that's what we really trust is the right numbers. And so all those things can actually take quite a while. And so the first year you do a budget, it's probably not going to be any good at all. You know, but you run through it, you do your best. For us, there's 2 things though that came up really quickly. So when we went to budget, we realized we were spending a ton of money on office supplies. It seemed really crazy. And what we did is we enabled our team. We brought our managers together and we said, hey, look, we seem a little high on budget for office supplies. What do you guys think? And so we went through and had them budget realistically what they would use on a regular basis. And we ended up cutting our cost by 2/3, which it wasn't a huge amount, it was a few $1,000s, so it added to the bottom line. The other thing that the forecast revealed really quickly was one of our sales techniques that we would use is free shipping because of Amazon and everything else. And so we realized how much money we were supplementing in free shipping. And so we still offer free shipping, but we do that based on what looks good on the numbers, and we have a forecast. I mean, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars that we were spending in free shipping. So it was a lot of money.
Do you build in free shipping to the cost of the goods, or is it really free?
Yeah, I mean, so generally, so it's a great question. So you can build it into the cost of the good if you're consistent, in my opinion, when we come into costing.
Right.
But the problem is that you kind of want to, if you use it as a sales technique, then you kind of build it into your forecast.
Right.
And so that way, then you look at it as a holistic cost of just doing business. And for us, it's difficult too, because like I said, 50% of our business is retail, and then 50% is, business to business where we charge them actually shipping. So, but we use it just as another discount. So we just assume that it's part of the margin that we have out there. So it's a great question. And shipping's a hard one in every sense. Amazon and all these other companies offer free shipping, so that becomes the expectation. So that's another story that we can talk to marketing about too. So, but being able to control, the forecast. Now we're in our third year of forecasting, and it's really nice. We get together on a weekly basis with our controller, and we can see things. We're pretty right on with most of our forecasts. Every once in a while there's something that comes up, but there's very little surprises. So that makes it easy to make decisions for us. All right, so this one's a little bit hard to talk about. I think cost accounting from a financial standpoint is probably one of the most difficult things to nail and get right. And so the idea of, if you have a product or service, how do you fully burden whatever that product or service is? And so most people can understand like direct labor and direct material. They understand how that applies. Coming up with the numbers, especially in the service industry, can be really hard to nail it down. But then you have companies with this, overhead expenses, and we have quite a few overhead expense. And so I put on there, that's peanut butter on toast. So you've heard the term like peanut butter, spread it over. We use it all the time. And one of the things that's difficult is to try to associate costs directly to the product that you're selling. And so there's a tendency of taking, say, a cost and saying, well, we're just going to spread this over all our products when it might not apply. And so one of the companies I worked for in the past, we had a technical product that represented probably, I'd say about 10% of our revenue. But it also represented 90% of our tech support calls because it was something that people needed help with. And so that's something to be considered when you're pricing it, because as that grows, you need to make sure that you can sustain that as well. And so we're always constantly trying to create better pricing in what we do. And so for us, like right now, we have pretty good numbers on our COGS, and we feel like we have good costing. But one of the things that we've really nailed a need for us to get into is costing per sales channel. So like when we sell directly online, it's easy to figure out. Or if we take a customer call or something like that, but then Amazon has a completely different pricing. So really nailing down those costs that we can associate even by channel, how much we're having to spend for the product, so that we know whether or not we're profitable or not. Because it's really easy if we've seen it in the past where it's like you spread the overhead costs and you end up having like one product or one line carry the burden of other ones, not knowing it, but it looks like it's profitable and it really isn't, or it's eroding the margins for the other one. So that's a pretty big deal. All right. So processes, this is a big part for us in a manufacturing is solid processing. There's a lot of lean manufacturing training that goes into process and nailing it down. And so this is an economist. He says, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And I think that's so true. Sometimes it feels like we have a process, but in actuality, we're kind of still not not following a process or we don't have them. So one of the things I've seen at other companies that we really fight against is that passion versus profit. And this can really drive your processes. And so if you have this passion, it can cause you to chase shiny things. And the process of choosing what you do and what you don't do is really difficult. And so that's kind of a saying around where we're at, where it's like, okay, are we chasing shiny things, or is this really, really what we want to be doing? And so I think all small businesses, I think part of the issue is every small business that I've worked for started from an entrepreneur who had a passion for something. And it's that passion from the entrepreneur that really pushed that business forward, because there's a lot of hurdles and a lot of hardship when you start up a business. And so that resilience and that passion really does drive what they do. But as the company grows, those passions can kind of deter you or kind of dilute what you should be doing a lot of times. And so it's a good thing to know. I had a owner of the last company I worked for. He was super passionate about what we did. It was off-road motorcycles. And we ended up making this product for a different company. And it wasn't cool, it wasn't nice, but it made so much money. It was 50% margin. We probably did $1 million in revenue. And for a company that was like $4 million, that was huge, obviously, 25% of our business. And we made huge amount of money on it, but he didn't like it because it wasn't what he was really interested in. And then eventually we got into the discussion about like, well, fine, I'm going to do it out of my garage because it makes so much money. And I'm going to quit the next day because I don't need to work here anymore. He's like, okay, we can do it, but then we can sell to this other company at a loss. And so his passion wasn't, it sounds crazy, but his passion wasn't really in the making of money. He just really liked being in the business and wanted to have a better relationship with this company. So I know it sounds crazy, like I'm making it up, but it was interesting. So, but a lot of times, like that's what we decide now, like even with Mountain Meadow Herbs, it's like what's important to the business, but how do we still stay true to our customers and still support them. And so a couple of statements that we talk about around the building is just because we can doesn't mean we should. And so a lot of times that's a really hard thing as a small business, because you've already, you've scraped by and you've had to sacrifice and you did what you had to do in order to get where you're at. But as the business grows, maybe some of those things, should be let go of. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then scalable and repeatable. And so that's a mantra in manufacturing, especially, but it's something that it's like, if you can't scale it or you can't repeat it, it's going to break eventually. And, and so one of the ideas is like, can we do this if we grow 100 times larger? And if it falls apart, then you really should be looking at whether or not it's viable for your business. And sometimes those things can be difficult. One of the things that we ended up doing was we ended up going through our SKUs. There it is. And we had an amazing amount. So we had 252 SKUs that we were selling, and 133 represented 5% of the revenue. And a lot of it was because they were combinations of things that we had and we could do it, that it really detracted from where we were at. And so we took a hard look at it and we said, okay, what can we get rid of? Well, revenue is super easy. Like if it doesn't make a lot of money, we're GMP, which is good manufacturing process and FDA compliant. So there's a lot of quality and a lot of overhead for each order that we make, we have to follow. So all of that, no matter what, if you're going to make a product, you had to set up, you had to get quality in there, do their checks, and then we had to clean up for every single one. So if they were small batches, we were losing money, or it was costing quite a bit. And so that was really hard for us, to take a look, because there was a lot of people that took our product and knew that Mrs. Smith needed this product. But we only sold 2 to Mrs. Smith all year. And that was the total, representative. Some of it was that easy. And so there's a couple of things we did. So one was volume, super easy. We could just look at the cost and be like, well, that actually cost us probably $100 to make and we sell it for 30. That makes no sense at all. The other one was competency. And this one's a hard one because a lot of times there's a little bit of pride, and we all want to make sure that, we know what we're doing, and, we don't want to say, oh, we don't know how to do that. But we had some processes specifically around some salves and some other products that we would do once a year. And when we would do it, we'd mess it up, or we just really weren't good at it. And so we couldn't get rid of it because the volume, we felt like this is a good product for our industry. But we ended up partnering with another company in the Valley, and it was their forte. And so we outsourced to them. So we were able to keep it and use it, but we weren't going to do it in manufacturing anymore. And the other thing was consolidating products. So a lot of times when you have different variants, we'd have 4 products that were exactly the same, or we had 3 different sizes. We said, no, what we're going to do is, we're going to offer one size and one product that we're going to market it this way. And that helped out a lot to kind of hone things down a little bit. And for us, it's a continued process. So as we grow other business entities or divisions within our group, other stuff looks less exciting. So even things that we skipped on the first year, we're taking a look at it this year. And there's a few things that we're going to discontinue. So people start buying into it, and we've had a really good response from our staff and really no pushback from our customers. But that can be a really hard thing to do, especially when we're talking about going back to that passion. If it's something you're passionate about, it's hard to get rid of because you're kind of blinded by it. And we're all passionate about stuff. I mean, there's things that we want to chase all the time. Okay, so for us, one of the things that we saw when we did our SKU rationalization is for every order that we make in manufacturing, we have a manufacturing order. I know that seems self-explanatory. And so that has to be issued like we talked about, and there's a process around that. So we've decreased our manufacturing orders by 56% over the time period over the last couple of years. And that usually, first thing is like, well, maybe you're going out of business because you're not doing that much work anymore. But we actually increased our customer orders by 47%. And there's a couple of reasons beyond that, but we really just got rid of the stuff that didn't make any sense to us. And so it really didn't affect our bottom line, or it didn't affect our revenue at all because it only represented 5%. And so that's something for us that we just keep in mind, is that there was an instant payoff for us. And there's a lot of other things that we don't consider. And some of it is, customer confusion. So if you have 100 products and a customer gets on your website, how do they identify, your company? And that's been, several companies I've worked for, is that we had products, in the past with automotive stuff where we'd have lighting and we had gauges and kickstands, and all of that kind of goes together, in our mind, but to the customer, really, it looked completely different. So, and like I said, it's a continual process for us as we go through and just look at products that we make and decide what's important for us to get out there. All right, so marketing. So this isn't, I have a business partner that runs the marketing side, but this is a really important part that they got into. There's a book called The Purple Cow. And so one of the sayings in there is, a crowded marketplace fitting in is failing, and a business marketplace not standing out is the same as being invisible. And so a lot of times, we talk about being a big fish in a small pond, being known for whatever it is. And so for us as a company, we were known to be a natural herb supplement company, which is great. But there's so many companies. You walk through Costco and all those companies say the same thing. And one of the things we talked about early on was like, why do people come to us? Why do customers come to us? And the answer a lot of times was like, because our stuff works, because it's pure. And all of that was true. And so it's not that what they were saying was false or untrue, but it also really didn't, strike a nerve for the customer. And it was really hard to convey that. We'd go to shows and, what's your identity, right? What is your competitive advantage? And a lot of companies do this too, where, they change throughout the course. 3M, started out making sandpaper, and now they're more into adhesive and medical supplies. Even Nike went in. I mean, they're known for shoes and they still are, but I was talking to one of the executives one time and they came out with a Nike watch and then they discontinued it. It's not because they couldn't do it. It's just, they said, we don't want to play in this space. This is a space for somebody else. And so it's this constant thing that I think that most companies, whether you're big or small, kind of go through and have to redefine what you do. And so I put up a few, so what we ended up doing, and we'll get into this a little bit more, is we said, well, what do we do really, really well? And a lot of our products were for kids, but specifically around fertility. And so we decided that a really good market for us is young moms, so families that are starting out. And one of the benefits is that in the natural supplement in the health industry, women in the household make a lot of the decisions as well. And so marketing to young moms kind of made sense just from our product line, but also from, just where decisions were being made. And so I put all these little things in italicized down below. We were going through like a 1-page, business planning from 2020. And so here's some of the things that we wanted to do. We have a lab for our testing, but they wanted to make a lab that was ISO certified and a source of revenue. We have a cafe, but they wanted to grow our cafe and conference center. We wanted to increase our local presence and get involved with farmers. We don't deal directly with farming at all. And then we wanted to be the #1 supplement vitamin store in the Valley. We're not really a store. So all those things became a detractor of like who we really were. And really, it's like we're a brand and we're a manufacturer, and let's get really good at those things. And there's a little bit of, what we do. We do have a store, but it's our product. We do have a cafe, and we do have a lab, but those are to support the need that we have. And so you can see how those things aren't bad, but those really aren't who we are. So one of the things that marketing did, so when we went from this idea of being a global supplement company, a lot of our colors are, pretty muted, pretty neutral tones, which was fine for that industry. But what we decided is if we're going to market to a specific company or a group, we want to be bold. And so pink was what we went with. And really one of our biggest products is called Gentle Birth. It's around birthing, obviously. And so you can see, these are 2 trade shows that we went to. So early on, it was pretty muted. There wasn't a whole lot of identity around it. And now when we show up, it's very clear. There's more imaging that we show that's very clear what we do. And even though we still carry 100 and some SKUs, we really promote about 12 of them. I mean, and we'll talk about everything else, but our messaging is around the Gentle Birth. And one of the interesting things that we were just talking about is it makes it pretty easy also from a marketing standpoint. So when you go in there and you decide, okay, what are we going to market? You're not just doing a shotgun approach, like, okay, we're marketing to moms. And it could be, a supplement product that's about immune, but it's moms and kids, and it makes it really easy on marketing, a lot simpler to have that message. And so that's been really nice for them to be able to kind of hone in what they do. And it's been really good. We've actually seen a huge amount of growth within those product lines that we've been focusing on. I think we saw 40% last year, and we're still seeing growth. It's just there's a huge amount of market out there.
How did you reach out to the young moms?
Well, it's the continual channels that we were in before. So some of it is we changed our imagery. So if you look at this next slide, before we would have something that would be a lot more neutral, that would be in the blue and white tones, but now, we're doing testimonials that are specific around the moms. We're using imagery around mothers and babies and kids and families, and then making sure that whatever we write, so we do radio ads here locally, but the radio ads are still focused on moms, like that's the audience we're speaking to, and that's what we have in mind. So we didn't really change a whole lot of where we market or where we reach out to. We just changed our messaging a little bit. So with that new direction, like I said, it did make things a little bit easier for us to market in there. And then, it continues down the road. It's made it a lot easier for us in staff meetings to decide what we're going after. Before, we were at the whim of whatever the market. So ashwagandha was kind of all the rage a few years ago. And so you'll see like all these ads out there, but we really would get lost in the noise. And specifically with some of our products, we really don't have a lot of competitors out there. And then the benefit is that what we'll see orders for are very unique, special items, but then at the same time, we'll see other add-on items that are maybe the, either things for after the birth or even immune stuff. So we see a lot of products that then, are riders on those. So this is our main message, and we continue with our main message, but it yields business other places as well. So, so vision, I think, this is always important for a company. And I think most companies have a vision, or they're always honing a vision. But the one thing that I think is missed a lot of times, the 3 companies that I've worked for were all international companies. And so Mountain Meadow Herbs is actually no difference. We only do about 3.5% of our revenue in Montana. It's pretty small. And so it could be easy to stay out of the valley or not be really interested, but there's something that happens when you create a network community. And that's part of, with Job Service Kalispell, and being part of the Employer Choice Award that we get excited about. That's why we're part of the Chamber of Commerce, and specifically the Manufacturing Alliance. We deal with MWED, and then we have a competitor in the Valley, sort of. Well, they're not in the same market. We don't really overlap, but we are in the same industry. And so we've developed relationships with them. And one of the bonuses is we had a machine go down, and they've helped us out by actually, doing business for us. So it's a very friendly, relationship, but those things can yield a lot of advantages that you don't think about. And it's not always about, for me, it's always I always look at the P&L. And so it's really hard for me to disconnect and be like, okay, this isn't, it's not adding to our revenue, it's not saving costs, but there's a reality of, going to other people and getting those relationships together. And one of it is hiring, obviously, so establishing, that hiring base and that knowledge of the Valley. One of the companies I worked for, we had an ad in a newspaper, and up to 2 years later, we would hear about it oh, I found out because you guys were in the newspaper, it's simple things that we wouldn't think that we were doing anything. And the newspaper was about us expanding our building. It had nothing to do with the business, but it also got us applicants in there. And so, reaching out. So the hiring one's an easy one, appointment. We're also, we're interested in increasing wages in the Valley. That's always part of our vision locally. We all know that it's a struggle, just through the last couple of years of just inflation, but specifically, I think in our Valley, it's out of control. And so we've been doing, what we can to wages, but that's really important from a value standpoint for a vision. We do charity stuff, and then just community engagement. And so, one of the stories, Job Service Kalispell came out and toured our facility. And one of the things that we got out of it was, besides this, was also, we were looking for an HVAC company, and so we just asked, hey, do you know anybody else that can have this specific HVAC need out there? And so we got a couple of good recommendations. I mean, that's not something that you would plan. And so that networking, getting out there, can be really difficult when you're a small company, because there's a lot of business to do, but it's really important. Even if, you don't do a whole lot of business in the Valley, it's really important to be able to get out there and network. So I think that's all I have. Thank you for inviting me out, and if there's any questions.
Fantastic. First of all, we'd like to see if there's anyone in our live or our in-person audience who has questions for Gordon. Otherwise, we will turn it to the virtual audience, and feel free to jump in or raise your hand if you have a question that comes to mind. So, Gordon, first of all, how did you rationalize eliminating so many SKUs all at once? Wouldn't it have been better to do a few at a time?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it could be scary jumping in. The one thing about rationalizing SKUs, or getting rid of them, is that it can take a long time. So it's really hard. You really just can't say, okay, tomorrow we're not going to sell that. For us, we have a catalog that we publish once a year. We have customers that are out there that we need to kind of wean off of, offer what we have and make sure that we have options for them. So that's part of it, that it's really hard to do it in a slow way, because you have to do it once a year for us. The other part is just experience from other companies I've worked with, is that I've never regretted killing a product. Once you make that decision that it doesn't work, you've already decided that it's already down the hill, that it's not going to make the money that you want to. And so that was one thing internally we talked about, is like, I've never regretted going too slow on getting rid of products. So, and then some of the products we held off on, and we're like, okay, we'll see what happens one more year. And so
You did experience the nail biting along the way a little.
a little bit. Some of ours were really easy. When you only sell 6 a year, that's an easy decision. Yeah.
Thank you. And then also, when you do an assessment for efficiencies and you determine maybe that 3 things need to be improved, how do you prioritize which to do first?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one. It's different for each business. I mean, again, I'm biased. I start out with the financials, and you look at what's the biggest win. And sometimes there's some easy things that come out that you can kind of cherry pick and say, okay, this one we know is going to make a big difference. And you can really get into. I think some of it is also the whole purpose of your business. And so having to go back and decide what your purpose is of your company. And sometimes that means breaking things down and taking a look at it. But a lot of times, I think there's a lot of things that we know need to be changed, but it's difficult because of just the busy lifestyle, especially in small business, of just buckling down and doing it.
Thank you. Before we go through more of the ones online, are there any questions that have come up in the room here? Bill, thank
I
you.
got one, yeah. I don't use supplements, but I'm wondering if you're appealing to a new customer, what, I guess, assembly of supplements should we think about using?
Yeah, so one of the things that the business was really founded on is a really good support team. And so we have a customer service group. We have an herbalist, a specialist on site that's trained in herbs. And so a lot of times people calling in or filling out our assessment will kind of lead them down the road that they need to go. And that's a great question, because if you don't know what's out there, but usually just having a conversation, we're a pretty well-staffed phone support team. So you can usually get somebody live during business hours. So that's what I would suggest. That's what I do. I go upstairs and talk to them. So
the other one is, you guys are the employer of choice frequently. What is it about your culture that keeps people hanging in there and working hard for you?
Yeah, you'd have to ask them. So yeah, it's always been important. Like, company morale has always been important to us. And I think building a good team, and I'm happy to be here, but really we have a great team of people that are passionate about what we do. We communicate as much as we can. I mean, we're not perfect, but I think we have a pretty good culture. People like to stay there for the most part. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So you were talking about some of the big things for being scalable and repeatable for your manufacturing process. At what point do you say we don't have either the resources or the time to efficiently do this ourselves? Obviously, when you relinquish control, that brings outside help in, that can be beneficial to your company at the time, or maybe it's inefficient at the time, but 10 years down the line, that's a relationship that get unforeseen things happen. What kind of drives that factor for decision making, saying we're going to bring an outside source in to help because we don't have the internal, talent for that or the time for it?
Yeah, unfortunately, like in my experience, it's because we messed up.
Okay.
And so there's been a couple of, so currently there was a process that we only did once a year, and it wasn't a big enough product for us to go through and do the process completely. And we knew we were lacking on it. And then we ended up destroying probably half the batch because it just wasn't spelled out well in the processes. At another company I worked at, we did these gauges, and it's an interesting thing because there was business that we got. They basically dashboards, and there was business that we received from a company, and we ended up doing 600, which is a really small amount. But that actually led into an acquisition of, because of that relationship. From a business standpoint, we should have never done it, but it did work out for the business. So it's hard sometimes to actually say, like, this is bad, this is good. But for the one that we ended up using, there's a local company called Kettle Care that does a lot of good stuff. That's on 93 on the way up to Whitefish. And that's what they do. They do salves and creams and stuff. And we were like, we already had a relationship with them anyway. We buy some of their products and sell them at the store. But then we were like, oh, we don't do really good at this stuff. And this is what they do really well. So that worked out really well. Yeah.
Yes, in the audience.
I was really interested in hearing your process and how you engage staff feedback. So can you tell me, was that already part of the culture? Were they surprised that you were asking for their input? And then when you did get the input, what were you surprised?
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could say that, yes, we started it, but we didn't. That's always been part of the culture of that company. But I think I'm surprised a lot of times how much feedback we get, because there's a lot of, you can get stuck with just going through the normal process, but a lot of times the staff, especially the ones on the floor, they know what they're running into. They know the issues, and usually they even have ideas on how to fix them. So that's always really good. Yeah.
Well, we've got another one here for you in the chat about finances are such an important part, and the accounting inefficiencies. If somebody is fairly new to business or just happened to start up their own without the education behind it, what would be the most beneficial class or type of accounting to get most familiar with first?
Yeah. Not sure. The companies that I've worked with, like they've always, so it was beneficial with Mountain Meadow Herbs that they had an accountant that was on staff when I started. She had started about 3 months before I did, and she knew her stuff. And previously, even companies worked with, like, people know how to do their books, but really weren't familiar with the accounting portion of it. I think I don't have a whole lot of contacts, but I think there's probably some really good CPAs that are in the Valley that can help really establish, good financials and good financial reporting, so you understand. The college, I'm sure, has some really good accounting classes, but it gets complicated, pretty quick. And it's taken a lot for me, even with a degree, working really close with my controller to understand how they view things. The knowledge that they have is pretty invaluable. So trying to find somebody that's willing to step in and do that, I think would be, I don't know where to find that. You guys probably do.
We try to have connections.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Another question is, once you identify the products or SKUs that you want to keep, how do you increase the sales to those? Did you increase a loss leader item or complementary products?
Yeah, for us, really just the process that we went through of getting rid of, like I said, that customer confusion. We were able to market the other products more and knowing what was out there, and being able to have the customers really identify with a certain product, it just started gaining momentum. And we've seen a lot of that. I wish, again, it's nothing special that we end up doing. Like, we didn't change, we've talked about before, we didn't change our process a huge amount in terms of who we marketed to or what we ended up doing, we changed what, but it wasn't like there was a huge change. It was just more incremental growth, but making sure that once we nailed down what we could be identified for, I think customers really then ended up identifying with that. And loss leaders are an interesting thing, you know, that we've talked about before. A lot of times I've got pushback from sales about like, well, we can't get rid of that because that's a loss leader. And really that can be part of the business. You know, like HP did that. They would sell printers at cost so they could sell their ink. But in the businesses I worked for, there's not been a lot that we would sell something where there'd be a consumable that would be obvious as a loss leader.
Thank you. And another question then, if you could explain a little bit more the partnership or balance with outsourcing the manufacturing of some of your products, how do you not lose your company integrity or identity by then outsourcing?
Yeah.
How do you keep it yours?
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, you know, from a procurement side, from the purchasing side, you know, making sure that you choose the right partner is one of them. You know, definitely one of the products we outsourced, the company, you know, like I mentioned, they were actually more of an expert than we were. And when we had meetings with them, they actually made the product better because they understood the process better than we did. You know, it's such a necessity though, as you grow, because there's going to be constraints. So unless you drop those product lines, you know, you have to find ways to make them. If it strains your business, either from a space standpoint, which we have, or an employee standpoint, you know, it's a necessity a lot of times. But I think also choosing partners that are similar, you know, that if you outsource to outside the country and you don't have the same heart or the same convictions your supplier doesn't, it's going to be really hard. You're going to constantly try to wrangle that company.
Well, if you could also share a little bit more detail or elaborate on the concept of sharing your vision, like how you were explaining your effort for continuous improvement when we toured, and that's how sharing your goals for improvement led to connections for like the HVAC.
Mm-hmm. You're sorry, can you restate that?
It was kind of a lot of work. Basically, the theory behind sharing your continuous improvement goals with who might even be your competition.
Yeah. I think, I mean, yeah, the idea of competition, it's different in each company. For us, we just don't have a lot of, I mean, there's competitors that we have out there, but locally we don't. And I think sharing in that vision, either, you know, internally, it can be protected. A lot of time, you know, management staff doesn't want to share it. But I think sharing it also creates an environment, you know, internally that then everybody's kind of on the same page, but then externally, even just talking about continuous improvement. And one of the things about tours or like new employees is a lot of times you kind of get set in your ways and you don't see what's going on in your company. And so, you know, being open to even, you know, Job Service Kalispell comes in and like, why do you do it that way? And then we go, oh, we do it this way. And then you go, I really don't know why. And you really have to reconsider that. And so we do that with new employees too. I think, you know, in the first few months, there's a lot of value that new employees asking questions, and questioning what you do is pretty important. So the more we share, the better.
Thank you. Another efficiency that became evident, and you even touched on with consulting your staff, is the career path thing. So how do you highlight career paths as an efficiency and promote that within? Like
within our staff?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we try to do an annual review, and at that time, it's really important to talk about career paths, what people want to do. And sometimes, you know, there's people that are very comfortable where they're at and they love what they do and really don't want to move, and we're okay with that. Or there's somebody who wants to do machining and we don't offer machining, but you know, we want to support that. And so we've worked around that a little bit. But I think it's, you know, like we say that, you know, people are the most important resource, and it is true. And so making sure that within what we do, we offer opportunities, either career improvements or even outside of our company, just understanding like what's best for them is going to eventually be best for us as well.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And one last call for questions in the room. Great, thank you.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you again, Garrett, for gifting your time and sharing your expertise on this topic today. We will leave Garrett's contact information up at the end in case you have any further questions for him. And this will wrap up the March 2024 Blueprint for Business Success Seminar. Within the next week, all registrants will receive an email with access to the recording, as well as any handouts and relevant links from today. Please follow Job Service Kalispell on social media and subscribe to our business email lists to catch the next blueprint and stay current on upcoming events. Lastly, we appreciate your feedback in the anonymous survey that will pop up when you click leave at the end of the seminar, or for those in attendance, it's a separate sheet of paper. Your feedback helps us to improve the program and offer future topics and content that is useful for Montana businesses. Thank you for attending.